Let's start with this guy here, William Casey. He was head of the CIA, and during the first staff meeting with Ronald Reagan, who many people say Ronald Reagan was the last president elected by the people. All the rest have been chosen since then. So this guy, William Casey, sits down with Reagan at the staff meeting, and this is what he says. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American people believe is fake, is false. So the subtitle and the new working title of this talk is Everything is Fake.
Welcome to another episode of the Lords of Consciousness podcast. I am your host, Clint Culberson. Today I am co-hosted with the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Richie Jones.
Thank you.
And this is a second part of a conversation that we had on the last episode with Brad-Olsen, author of many books, but specifically today we're talking about his book, Future-Esoteric. Bam, right there. By the way, Brad, beautiful artwork on both of the esoteric books. I totally, utterly dig it. I got to get me like a poster of that thing. But Brad Olsen, how are you, bud?
I'm doing great, guys.
This has been a great combo. I wanted to kind of get this. We'll just kind of get back into this because this is a continuation of our conversation we've already been involved with. If you haven't already listened to the last one, please do. It's where we explain. We really dive in. Brad really dives into really the whole idea of the control conspiracy. What has been, who's really running the show on this planet in terms of the geopolitical scene, the wars that are happening, the entire banking system, the media that's been completely compromised, that's literally affected the lives of every single person on this planet. If you're working in a job that you don't love, trust me, it's a direct result of this system that we're talking about. If there are dreams that you have that you felt like you had to forego because you had to get a real job, something practical, it's why it's so vital to understand why you felt compelled to make that choice. And why, we'll get into later in this conversation, why and how vital it is that whatever dream that you put on the shelf, it's time to dust it off and bring it back to your life, and make courageous decisions to follow your heart. And we'll get into that. There's a second part of your book called Cosmos. You started with secrets, which is how, how many secrets have been out there. There's a black government going on. And again, that the rabbit hole goes very deep. But the second part, which is the probably the most fascinating rabbit hole of all time, which is Cosmos, which is our connection to life outside of this planet, extra-terrestrial, beyond this Earth. And you dive into, in the very beginning of your book, you dive into. Actually, before I go into that, let's talk about this. Next week, what are the dates again?
It's June 3rd through June 6th.
June 3rd through June 6th is an event at Joshua Tree in California called Contact in the Desert, which is pretty much the bee's knees of everyone who's discussing the extraterrestrial question. Are going to be there giving talks and seminars and workshops and you name it. And some of the brightest names. Who are some of those guys, Richie? Other than Brad Olsen, who else is there?
Graham Hancock, David Wilcock, Robert Bivall, Giorgio Tsoukalos, George Nuri, Jim Mars, Linda Moulton Howe. I mean, it's just like the Super Bowl of anything extraterrestrial. It really is.
Yeah,
there's so many great minds.
It's a geek fest of all time, but we say it's a geek fest, and we say, some people might see it as some niche topic, but and this is why I want to get into this, because it's way beyond a niche topic, because the reality of this, as Brad mentioned in our talk before we even push record, is how the reality of extraterrestrials really will be the greatest event to ever unfold in the history of human, at least our current, recorded history. That when we finally have disclosure that they exist, it will literally shake everyone's foundations, for good or bad. And I wanted to kind of get into your experience, Brad, of you had mentioned the beginning of your book, your own extraterrestrial experience on a hike you had in the late 90s that kind of really, I can only imagine, propelled you down this rabbit hole of I don't even want to call it rabbit hole anymore, but just propelled you down this truth that is inevitably going to be unveiled. Can you kind of go into that experience or recount it maybe? And
Yeah,
whatever
absolutely.
detail you want to go, that's great. If you want to keep it brief, it's up to you.
Well, no, a week ago today, I was right here at Crater Lake, and this is where I had that experience.
Oh, wow.
Right up here on the peak behind Wizard Island, you can see. And I was there because the Travel Channel had me speaking on several episodes called Mysteries of the National Parks. And it's very flattering because they're going to recreate my experience viewing phenomenon at Crater Lake 19 years ago. And basically what had happened was, as you mentioned, I was up there hiking and we had just watched a beautiful sunset. It was still quite light out. And myself and two of the backpackers had seen this streaking bright white light across the sky with no beginning and no end. And I'll never forget it, and I still can't figure out what it was, but it led me down this trail to try to understand the entire UFO ET enigma, because there was no explanation of what I'd seen. There's nothing I would have liked more than to open a book or to find the information to explain to me that this streaking white light was going right into the center of Crater Lake. But before it reached the surface of the lake, it disappeared, and it disappeared into these perfectly square blips of light. And myself and the two people I was with, we just fell to the ground laughing because it was just so incredible. We had a couple other guys we were with. We were running to catch up to them, and we saw the exact same thing over Mount Shasta about 40 miles to the south. So we had two sightings of phenomenon within a few minutes, and that was just truly incredible. And so to have the experience of seeing phenomena, I'm not sure if you guys ever have, but it really coalesces in your mind that there is something out there that is not being told to us, that needs explaining. And really it was this pivotal moment in my travel writing career that set me on this course to eventually write the esoteric series. And most specifically, and the reason I'm going to Contact in the Desert is because of the section in this book on ETs and UFOs and trying to understand this whole enigma within a riddle of our place in the cosmos and how we can maybe, hopefully in our lifetimes, have some kind of meaningful contact with benevolent ETs.
Absolutely. You have a part in your book I wanted to kind of start this off with. And it goes like this. A 2002 Roper poll of American beliefs and personal experience on intelligent life on other planets using rigorous scientific polling methods found that 48% of U.S. adults believe that intelligent life from other planets or dimensions is now visiting Earth, and 67% of U.S. adults believe in the existence of intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. The Roper poll also found that 72% of American adults believe the U.S. government is not telling all it knows about spacecraft or unidentified flying objects visiting the Earth. Fully, 14% of Americans say they have had a close encounter with a spacecraft or an unidentified flying object. 2% of Americans told Roper that they had an encounter with intelligent beings from other planets or dimensions. Roper also, we'll just end it there. But the statistics from this study are showing that this is way more prevalent than anyone really wants to admit. You know, it's not just some question of, hey, do you think they exist, and that's it, and then on to the next topic. Like, there are way too many people who have come forward with, even abduction stories. We're talking a lot of people, not one or two, but thousands of people all around the world who have had these encounters, and to say that they're all crazy or that they're all, it's some figment of their imagination. It's where there's smoke, there's fire, and maybe we should just at least objectively try to look into this. Why is there such a rigorous effort from the powers that were, as we explained in the first podcast, to keep this hidden? Why are there so many stories from people who say, I had this experience, and then all of a sudden guys in black suits showed up and said, shut up, don't ever tell anybody? I mean, that's not only one encounter. Like, a lot of people have had experiences where the powers that be show up on the scene and say, nothing happened.
Well, you got to understand, this is a complete paradigm changer. Everything will change once meaningful disclosure is made, because for one, and I have this in Future Esoteric, take the John Lear test. He was on Coast to Coast a while ago, and he said to Art Bell, but way back when, and he said, what would you do if you were president? If you knew that this was going to totally bog you down for not only months, but maybe years explaining the secrecy leading up to disclosure, would you do it? And what's really interesting right now is my friend Stephen Bassett, who is a lobbyist for disclosure. He just wrote an article recently that maybe Obama, in his waning months, could be the disclosure president, because it's about the only time you could do it without being totally bogged down. Almost like the way Eisenhower laid down the military-industrial complex speech, his last speech. That's the one time you could do it, and then the next administration takes over.
Drop the mic.
Yeah.
Run off stage.
Drop the D-bomb.
Yeah.
Or it could very well be that another country, Russia, China, maybe Japan, will drop the D-bomb, and then we'll have to respond. But the reason it's been kept so tightly secret is because it is what's known as the core secret, that this is the mother of all secrets. This is the reason we have gone from horse and buggies a little over 100 years ago to a man on the moon in 69, and now what myself and many believe to be a breakaway civilization in the secret space program is going on. An incredible jump in technological advancements, the likes of which have never been seen before. And what this all comes down to is this acquisition of alien technology in the form of recovered crafts. And this actually goes back to the Nazis. They had a crash in the Black Forest in the 1930s, as well as access to another one in fascist Italy under Mussolini. As we said in the first segment, a lot of those Nazi scientists, especially Werner von Braun and many others who worked on many of these programs, came over to the U.S. and started NASA. So you have this incredible amount of secrecy. The entire apparatus for the intelligence agencies pretty much growing up around the idea that they had to sequester not only the technology when it was acquired and create these underground bases where they could work unobstructed from public view. And I'm talking about Area 51, Dulce. There's about 130 underground bases, and I have a chapter in Future Esoteric about it. But the whole mentality that we have to keep this out of the purview of the American public, not only them, but the democratically elected Congress and the president, who do not have access to this. And there have been multiple attempts to crack into this secrecy surrounding these black operations, these black projects, which are off the book and off the records. And a lot of people don't understand that this is how it all gets done, and this is how it's funded and financed. And why do you think we're trillions of dollars in debt? Where did all that money go? Certainly not into the infrastructure, but it had to go somewhere. And this is really the funnel that has taken the lion's share of the debt that we're now found ourselves in.
The secret space program is one of those topics that now again, here's a deep rabbit hole, but there's so much evidence now coming out in terms of people who say they've been a part of it. For those familiar with a guy named Corey Good, who's come out and has his own, pretty much its own TV program with David Wilcock on Gaia Television, explaining, and sharing his experiences with it. And, it's one of those things that it goes, how do I say it? Some of it seems so unbelievable, and yet Corey Good is not the only one coming out saying it. There's many people like Corey Good who've come out and have shared similar experiences, and it's funny how much some of their stories match, And when you made this book, what kind of direct evidence did you come into contact with in terms of going through some of your research? You talked about underground bases and so on and so forth. People probably, someone who's hasn't delved into this probably listens to this and is like, oh my gosh, what is this guy talking about? Can you kind of give us an example of some of the direct evidence that you've come across that was so compelling to you that made you realize, holy cow, man, this is a slam dunk that something's here?
Sure. Well, I suppose the first encounters that I've had, apart from the one I described at Crater Lake, came from just driving down Nevada Highway 375, called the Extra-Terrestrial Highway. When I was working on my book, Sacred Places North America, at 108 Destinations, I included one of those 108 destinations to be this little town of Rachel, Nevada, with this funky little pub and restaurant and motel called the Little Alien. And the reason I included it is because
that's awesome.
There were many people just like me who are pilgrims for this kind of subject. And when you think of pilgrim, you often think religion. Well, UFOlogy has almost become its own modern new age type of religion. And I'll tell you, I saw dozens of people there, and they were camping out at night, and they had their binoculars and telescopes fixated on Area 51, which was only about 20 miles away. There used to be this place called Freedom Ridge where you could hike up there, and it was only 10 miles away. And on the top, you could actually look down into portions of Area 51 and S4. And boy, some footage that came out of there is just incredible, just levitating crafts and balls of light and all sorts of things. They, of course, closed that off, so now about the closest you can get these days is this town of Rachel. So going there on multiple occasions and just kind of acquiring information about how secretive this location was and many others, which also contained these underground bases, really kind of set me off on this idea that there's a lot we have not been told. And again, what we're not being told also speaks volumes.
Absolutely.
One of the first things that you talk about in the Cosmos section of Future Esoteric is actually about anti-gravity.
Yeah.
One of the greatest technologies that we have not been told about.
That's right.
Can you delve into anti-gravity and how that works and the things that you've come across with your knowledge of it?
Sure. Well, what's so interesting is you can go right now on the internet and type in anti-gravity and find videos of levitating bowling balls, of levitating frogs, not killing them or anything, showing that this technology is very much well established and has been for decades. We don't get it here, of course. We don't have anti-gravity crafts to take us to Europe in a fraction of the time anymore. And the other thing that's really interesting about the underground bases is that they do utilize free energy and these maglev trains, magnetic levitation trains, that apparently travel at Mach 2 speeds. That's twice the speed of sound. So they're obviously sequestering a lot of this technology for their own projects and their own good, but not sharing it with us surface dwellers up here. And I think that has to end.
Oh, definitely. One thing you talked about earlier as well was going to the moon.
Right.
When we went to the moon, there was radio silence for a certain amount of time.
Right.
One of your first things you talk about in the otherworldly structures, I think it's called,
Yep.
is about that transmission that was kind of intercepted on a ham frequency of these babies are enormous.
Yep.
What were they talking about? Were they talking about holes in the ground? I don't believe so.
No, they were talking about the multiple bases and moon settlements, which could actually be described as cities on the dark side of the moon. When they went around, I had the great honor and experience of hanging out with Buzz Aldrin at a travel show about 15 years ago. And it was kind of in my early questioning phase, and so I was tagging along with him. He had some speaking engagements to do, and I knew who he was, and I was trying to warm up to him the whole time and be like a cool guy and chumming around with him. And finally, I mean, this is like after an hour of hanging out with him and asking him a couple softball questions, I decided to go for it. And I said, so Buzz, what about these reports of orbs surrounding the lunar module on the way back from the moon? And he just looked at me with these steely blue eyes, and it wasn't like he was saying yes or no. He didn't reply, and there were other people who were listening, and I understand why he couldn't say anything. But the message I got is, wow, you know about that? And no, I'm not going to say anything about that. So one thing I'm going to talk about at Contact in the Desert is there's really three ways of looking at humans in space. Some people say that it's impossible. We never went to the moon. Stanley Kubrick faked all the photos, and humans can't get past the Van Allen belt. Then there's others that say, well, the story of humans going to the moon is correct, and okay, maybe Kubrick did fake a few that got out there, but the government's telling us everything, and we had the shuttle program, but now we're broke and we can't go back up there. And then the third, of course, is, oh, we've been up there for a long time, ever since the Nazis, really. The Nazis will someday be credited as the first men on the moon, and there are bases that will tell that story, even on the backside, one that's shaped like a swastika. And when that story is told, we may look at the Third Reich, at least their scientists, in a much more favorable way, shall we say, because the things that they did were just unbelievable at the time they did them, as well as some of this technology, including Die Glock, the bell, which I describe, and some of the other fantastic technology, including their own line of anti-gravity round craft. The Hanubu and the Vril are two varieties of that. And by the way, they all went missing after World War II. Never found any of those, but they did make an appearance on several occasions, not in a military capacity, more in like getting above and studying. That great tank battle outside of Moscow was supposed to be one of the sightings of some of their Hanubu craft. Those all went missing. And another thing that I mentioned in Future-Esoteric in the Fourth Reich in America is that they had already set up this base in Antarctica. And this was called Base 322 or New Berlin. And there was a time when one of their admirals, Admiral Dolence, leaked it out that we have built an impregnable citadel for the Fuhrer. And this is where many of those submarines were heading. And by the way, many of those submarines have never, ever been recovered. That we know that the Third Reich produced a lot more that have either surrendered or were known to have been destroyed. So a lot of technology went missing, a lot of their own military wares went missing. And what's so interesting is right then at the end of the war, 1946, 1947, which is summer down in Antarctica, there was this great armada of ships under Truman. He said, okay, Admiral Byrd, you've been to the South Pole. I want you to go back there. You're going to head up this fleet. And they encountered some of these craft. Maybe the Hanubu or Vril craft came up out of the water and sunk a destroyer called the Murdoch. Okay, and it just freaked the Allies out. They hastened back 2 months after their 6-month excursion, scientific excursion, and Admiral Byrd leaked that they were confronted with a craft that could go pole to pole in in a day, in a matter of hours. So we're talking about incredible technology being witnessed by our own Navy in 1946. And isn't it interesting that the next year you have the Roswell crash, and you have what many believe was this Allied agreement with the Fourth Reich that went underground, and then the infestation here in America through Project Paperclip.
Antarctica is fascinating to me because it seems like this barren place. Look at who owns Antarctica. Like, there's all these high-profile people that have stakes in Antarctica. Why? Why do these people want a piece of this, so to speak? And he spoke of the destroyers. These things got sliced in half with a laser. Like 46, nobody has that technology.
Right.
You know? I mean, it's just mind-blowing to see everything that's going on in this time frame, and how Germany had such a presence in Antarctica, like the cave and everything like that. And it's just mind-blowing to me to think that all this goes back so far, and there's so much information out there, and so few people have the desire to want to reach it. And that's one thing I do. What I do here is to reach those people, to try to, hey, this is the big picture here. And that's one thing I appreciate about people like you as well, Brad, is because you bring information to people in a very easy way. Like, the way you break down your books is amazing, because it's just a little clip here, a clip here, a clip here. You don't try to spread the big picture all at once. So just thank you for what you do and the way you write. You know, I really appreciate that from my point of view. It's just easy to read. It's easy to delve into.
Oh, thank you very much. And of course, these are very complex issues, and for me to try to make it understandable to everybody is really my objective here, because I've always said from day one that we have a right to know this stuff. People have a right to know. Not everybody is going to get into this. Not everybody is going to find this information useful, although I think they should. But that's what makes them esoteric subjects, really, is because it's only a select few who are going to glom onto these kind of subjects and really grasp them and then take it one step further. I want these esoteric guides to just be a way that people can open their horizons, an introductory course into many different subjects, and then whatever really interests them, they can go further with that with their own individual research.
What does disclosure bring to humanity? And and when we use the word disclosure, we're talking about disclosure on the what we really know, the stuff that's been hidden from us. So let's say let's just play out the scenario that Obama comes out at the end of his presidency and is like, hey, everybody, I got something to tell you, and this is what's really been going on. What then, beyond everyone freaking out, and, what do you envision taking place at that point?
Well, let me just start by saying what then before. And what then before is the threat to a complete collapse of religious institutions. They just really wouldn't make much sense to most people after a full disclosure. Many of the government institutions will find themselves obsolete in the same sort of way. But more importantly, energy, which is the number one industry on this planet, will become obsolete as we know it. Because right after the first question of, oh my God, we've been in touch with them for all this time, why didn't you tell us? After people get quite understandably angry that they've been denied this information for many decades, the number two question is, well, we know that they sure didn't come here with solid fuel boosters like a Roman candle being propelled through the sky via Werner von Braun. We know they didn't get here with the kind of fuel that we use, but with exotic technology and with anti-gravity technology and with free energy technology. So really the most important salient point here is that everything we think we know about energy and how we're going to keep electrified this planet is going to come to a grinding halt, and then we're going to phase in the free energy technology, which has actually been around for over 100 years thanks to Nikola Tesla and many other free energy inventors, and I get into that in the free energy chapter in Future-Esoteric. And these guys have just been squashed like bugs because they're going up against the biggest economic power in the planet, and they cannot have any competition to that hegemony.
Yep. I want to read. I want to read part of that section in your book in terms of free energy, and this is kind of going to. This will be kind of our transition into the third part of your book called Utopia,
Yep.
because free energy, just even the idea of it, even if you don't even understand the technology or that it actually exists out there and is being completely repressed, and the effects of what that would do for everyone on this planet, literally quite possibly ending poverty for the billions of people who live on this planet. And here's what you say. The elite controllers referred to throughout this book have a history of obstructing anything that threatens their own power structure, including revolutionary new energy technologies, as you just explained. Today, the hydrocarbon and nuclear lobbies represent a multi-trillion-dollar per year industry. Those with financial interests in the current global petrochemical industry are literally suppressing the very information and solutions we need to restore our planet to health. Our need for radical energy solutions could not be more urgent. So explain then what, as we go into this utopian section of your book, explain the ramifications of free energy. What does that do for the starving people in some of the most poor places in this country or in this world?
Well, I mean, it could mean a solution to so many of our problems. For one, fresh water is very much a scarce commodity, and many people don't even have access to it. So what free energy could represent is desalinization plants all over the world, allowing us not only to give people fresh water for free, but we could turn deserts into fertile farmland as well, because then we would have the ability to make water totally abundant and make things grow where deserts once were too barren. You know,
Like they do in Israel.
That's right. And Saudi Arabia has them too. You know, just keep in mind that energy used today is 19th century technology. Oil, gas, and coal were energy technology one step above animal horsepower energy. Okay, you'd think in 120 years we might have thought of something better, and then you factor in Nikola Tesla. I think at the very least, let's get caught up to speed with retesting all the Tesla-based free energy technologies, including the Wardenclyffe Tower that he developed on Long Island before the famous lines were uttered by J.P. Morgan, his financier, who said, "Where's the meter?" And Tesla said, "Well, there is no meter, it's free." And boy, that's all that took to squash him like a bug. So we can do better. We can do much better. We've had the ability to do better for a long time. We just have to open this up and make this planet pollution free. But of course, that's not where the money is at, and that's why they're going to fight this one tooth and nail till the very end. And that's, in my belief, the real reason why disclosure has been delayed for so long, because it will put an end to the largest industry on this planet, and that's energy.
Absolutely. And when you think about, especially again going back to the money system, and how much it costs per person to buy those energy units from these, fossil fuel industries. And you start realizing, and then people who are in these economies that are created by them, and they can't afford it. They're denied simple aspects of our life that here in the Western world we take for granted. When you consider parts of third world countries where they have to go hike 2 miles down to a watering hole to bring it back, and yet we have technologies that could easily solve that problem for everyone on this planet. You start realizing that that's kind of done on purpose. If we really wanted to solve that problem, we'd solve it tomorrow easily, and which is all the more reason why it's so vital for us to overtake overcome and overtake the powers that be, to make them the powers that were, and bring in and rein in a new age that, to be honest with you, from a spiritual perspective, is inevitable, if you ask me. And I think you'd probably agree with that also, and especially as you connect all the dots that are happening on this planet right now. What are let's talk about the money system again. Let's go a little more into depth with it, because I think when we talk about overcoming this system, and let's say tomorrow we get disclosure, we get a Nuremberg trial of epic proportions, where we get to start calling out the people who've done this, and we get to take them out of power, and then all of a sudden we're left with the power again. The people of the world have the power again.
Right.
What then, right? Maybe all the financial systems collapse, and maybe that's where this will go. Then what? Do we start over and try to start a new money system that is more advantageous? Or, like you said in the book, maybe do we fight for what inevitably, if you can dream utopia, there would be no money, like you mentioned in the book. And how do we get there?
Right. Well, a nation can never truly prosper as a free, fair, and egalitarian society as long as it has a rigged monetary system as we have today. Mm-hmm. I mean, today's money is privately controlled creation. And these controllers, who own a government-sanctioned central bank, as we have in almost every country on earth, long ago convinced the governments of the Western world to adopt their funny money and rule that it may be made into the legal tender. This funny money is fake money because it carries no intrinsic value. It's just a piece of paper with ink on it, much like toilet paper, but with ink. And it's now increasingly, it's just digits typed into a computer. I saw recently that there's only about less than 2 trillion in actual legal tender in this country, but we're now 16 trillion in debt. So where did it go? I mean, it's just digits typed into a computer. It's fiat currency, and the word fiat means by government decree. But it's so funny that money gets its value just because the government says so, and this government is not even a government entity. Greenspan was on the NewsHour in the 1980s, and Jim Lear asked him, well, who do you guys report to, and can the government make any suggestions? He's like, no, they can't. So this is the shadow government, if we really want to get into it. And the shadow government uses the Federal Reserve and the IRS as further sources of funding. The Federal Reserve prints millions of dollars in cash every year, but pays only for the manufacturing costs, this magic printing press. This fiat money is then injected into the economy, where people assume it has real wealth, and thus do real work and create real products in exchange for these worthless reserve notes. Normally, this would cause inflation, but what the Federal Reserve prints, the IRS later takes through income tax. So it's this great scam, really, because what goes in as fake cash is then taken out as real wealth. Mm-hmm. That is, the citizens are shafted, and the parasites of humanity grow even fatter. And that's why they're ready to spring this whole New World Order trap on us, because they've got us to a point where the middle class is shrinking and the lower class is desperate. We've become this nanny state where everybody needs a handout to survive, or so many people are on some form of assistance. Look, if that rug got pulled out from underneath, there would just be rioting in the streets. There was a famous quote from the French Revolution that the people of France, they recognized, and this is true for everybody, are only 8 meals away from revolution. Think about that. 8 meals away. You go hungry for 8 days, if the ATM machines go off, or I was here in the 89 earthquake in California, in Santa Cruz, where it happened. I remember how quickly those shelves go bare. When everybody panics, they just buy everything in the store. If you're even an hour late, you're out of luck. So we're teetering on this very fast motion set of circumstances that could throw us into a Venezuelan style catastrophe very quickly if they're ready to spring their trap. And then once they do spring their trap, then it becomes a police state. Then the FEMA camps start opening up. Then any dissidents or people like that could be rounded up. And I'm just going to jump a little fast forward into the Utopia section, because I have a chapter about a dystopian reality. And this is what I'm explaining, is this dystopian reality, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can cut them off before they get to this point, and hopefully round them up and get them arrested before they can spring this trap on us. But even if they do, just the power goes out, I just want people, don't lose hope. Maybe there is these white hats in the government that will actually work on our behalf, and the constitutionalists, the people who have taken a vow, especially those in the military. Remember, every single person who joins the military takes a vow to uphold the Constitution and fight against those powers, foreign or domestic, okay? And the domestic part is what we really need to focus on, because the framers of the Constitution knew this over 200 years ago, that there would be this potential to collapse the United States from within. And I think we're seeing it happening, and we just have to be ready for it when it does.
Yeah, I just recently saw the movie Gladiator, the famous movie from 2000. It came into the theaters again. We kind of have the retro movie night at the theater around here.
Nice.
And it's one of those movies where you're like, God, I wish we could have like a Maximus character in our army that could be like, okay, boys, we've been compromised, and the boys decide to follow his lead, as opposed to, if a guy like that even came out like that, he'd be axed right away. I mean, there'd be some conspiracy, or even like Petraeus, where all of a sudden he's got all of his mistresses come out, and it's hasta luego, dude, you're done.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of stuff he was going to say, and for them to, that's usually how it works. But I don't want to vilify men and women in the military, or vilify men and women in police, the police force, because in some ways, we understand that the pretense of which they probably signed up for this, but it's so vital for especially those men and women to understand what's going on right now, because in a way they really do have the power to just say, I ain't listening to this anymore. And if enough of them do that, we could truly get to where you're talking about, in terms of really pulling the if the foot soldiers of these powers that be just decide not to act on their behalf anymore, it's done. I mean, it's like literally done tomorrow. We could change this right away. I want to share a quote from your book. The largest social movement in the history of humankind is happening right now. There are over 1 million organizations in the world currently working toward ecological sustainability and social justice. There is power in our numbers. We outnumber the architects of the global domination agenda by more than 1 million, or more than 1 million to 1. All we need to do is awaken against their oppression and demand justice. And that is a powerful quote, man, because we must understand when we get into this negative cycle of, the powers that be, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. What am I going to do against the CIA, blah, blah, blah. And then you go, wait a minute, 1 million to 1.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine an island where we all end up on an island. There's 1 million of us, and there's one guy who owns, who decides he's going to take all the coconuts. Wouldn't 999,999 of the people go, wait a minute, what's up with this, dude? You're not getting all the coconuts. There's a bunch of us here. And that's kind of what's happened. Yep. And yet that is the scenario that's in place. And if we just understand that, especially when you break it down into those fractional numbers, you start realizing, we could change this easily. I mean, it could be the easiest thing ever, but it's that idea of how do we get to that point of understanding those numbers, each of those 1 million people understanding this ratio, understanding the problem, and then to act. How do we get to that point? We're in the middle of it right now, but how is that happening, and what is needed for that to continue to happen so that we can, make the numbers game totally to our advantage?
Well, we're doing it right now by having this conversation, by getting this video out to the masses. That's why the internet is such a threat to the powers that were. Jay Rockefeller said about 10 years ago, we should have never let the internet become free. We should have always kept it bottled up in national security, because we're exposing them. And they don't like exposure. They live in the shadow world. They live in the black government world. And black means it's shrouded in secrecy and it's kept from the rest of us. Well, we're figuring out their game. We see what their mode of operation is, and we see what their end game is. What they really want is full, total, complete control of the human race, of all its resources, everything we need to survive. And if they can wrap that up through this fiat currency, gosh, it's the biggest crime that will ever be committed, and it's well underway, and it's in the process. So what we have to do is cut them off at the pass. And I like how you brought up the fact that there are very brave men and women, not only in our military, but people who have retired from the military, and these are called the Oath Keepers. And the people who are still active in the Pentagon are called the White Hats. And there are people who are constitutionalists and want to preserve this country. So there's this great internal schism that's going on right now, and we can only hope and hope to aid these people who are trying to free this country from the tyranny it's now under, and hopefully we can evolve to this golden age. And that is the true prospect of what we can become as a human race, is ending war, is sharing resources, is releasing free energy so we can fertilize deserts and do so many other different things to benefit everybody. Because really we're all in this together, and we can't leave anybody behind. That's not part of the plan. They would love to. They would love to get rid of 90% of us and just read what's on the Georgia Guidestones. They want to keep humanity in perpetual balance of 500 million. Okay, well, there's 7 billion of us. So what happens to the other 6.5 billion? And they have a plan to start culling the herd. And this is where it gets pretty dark, but it needs to be talked about. Mm-hmm. And we need to look at the ways that they do this. This probably is better for a conversation on the book Modern Esoteric, when I get into the control mechanisms of this planet, the way that they're being poisoned, and the way we can counter that and make ourselves healthier and happier and actually live a fruitful and abundant life, even if we don't have a lot of these energy units, which are Federal Reserve notes. You don't need that to be happy. Happiness comes from inside. And this is how we can do a little management of all this bad news that we're getting. It's still a beautiful world out there, and there's still people like you guys who care, and we're getting this out there, and the internet is our great savior. You know, we couldn't have this conversation 20 years ago. We just couldn't. I mean, the internet wasn't evolved enough. There was no bandwidth, and we can today. So people are waking up as a result of this, and the alternative media is the alternative narrative that I define in this book. And really the only way you're going to get to the bottom of many of these issues is your research on the internet, which is like the new Library of Alexandria. We have so much information at our fingertips that you can go anywhere you want to go and do research and be a critical thinker about it. Because look, there's two sides to every issue out there. You can get any article to give you confirmation bias on anything you want to think about. But this is where I say our God-given right of discernment, using our critical thinking and analytical skills to separate the wheat from the chaff. And then you can come to some real brass tacks on what's really important and what really matters.
You, well said. Jeez, I mean, beyond well said. In fact, it goes perfectly with this next quote. In the remaining time we have, I just want to share. I want to share this quote. I want to talk about it, and then we have one more quote that totally surmises everything so perfectly. This is called Earth's Dilemma. Is a scenario in which our current government, or those who secretly rule those who govern, is complacent in keeping the global population in a deep sleep. Yet each one of us has free will. Each one of us is a free soul, and each one of us possesses a free consciousness. This is your life, and all life is precious. Do what you love, do it often, and never forget you have the freedom of choice. If you don't like something, change it. If you don't like your job, quit. If you don't have enough time, stop watching TV. If you are looking for the love of your life, stop looking. He or she will be waiting for you when you start doing the things you love. Stop overanalyzing, since linear thinking can get in the way of deeper intuitive knowing, such as an intuition for the subjects of the unseen realms. Life is simple. When you eat, appreciate every last bite. Open your mind, arms, and heart to new things and new people. Our differences are superficial. Ask the next person you see what their passion is, and share your inspiring dreams with them. Travel often. Getting lost will help you find yourself. Some opportunities only come once, so always seize them. Life is about the people you meet and the things you create with them. So go out and start creating. Life is short. Live your dream and share your passion. Dude, that should be on posters in everyone's house for shit's
Can we make
sakes.
that the mission statement for the website?
God, seriously, we're stealing it, dude. That is such an epic summation of what when you say, like, here's the problems of the world, but then how do we solve them, right? Yeah. Well, all we can, if I could somehow control the masses, it would be, okay, well, all of us will go and we'll organize and do this and da-da-da-da-da. But the only person that I can control is myself. And you really explained so well in this quote right here what each of us can do. Like, if you're listening to this and you feel overwhelmed by it, I mean, honestly, if you stick in the conspiracy world too long, it can you can become a little depressed, you can become cynical, you can become negative, you can really have an effect on your spirituality. I know that it does with me sometimes, because I've been diving deep into it, and sometimes it takes a toll on me in terms of, I think it's a process of coming in and out, right? Like, it's okay to discover the shadow parts of this world, but make sure that we're still coming into our light, still realizing why are we even talking about this? Why is it even worth understanding all of this knowledge and the history and so on and so forth? Because of what you just said, and it's so important that we find our passions. And that's really the premise of our entire website is people who are finding their passions, just like you did. Your passion was traveling, was the history of humankind, was ancient civilizations, was your extra-terrestrial experience, was the entire situation that's happening. That was your passion, and look what you created, and look how it's affecting others. It's what a ripple effect. So imagine if millions of us do kind of like what Brad-Olsen's done, and we do our version of it. It doesn't mean we all have to become authors and publishers. That's not it at all. It's just find each and every one of our individual passions, no matter what it is. And that literally, one thing I've realized is that darkness is really just the absence of light, and that these powers that have literally no power against light. I mean, when Luke Skywalker chooses the Force for the good, there's nothing that the Emperor or Darth Vader can do to him. Literally nothing. There's not, unless they can get him to choose darkness. Right. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And sorry, I was supposed to have you talk here, but this is such an epic part of this book that when you think about all the things you're talking about, I mean, maybe share with us why it's so important to go on your own spiritual journey. I mean, this is a spiritual topic. Everything you're talking about is not just dirty politicians and things like that. It's actually quite spiritual. Even the extraterrestrials, especially when you're talking about they quite possibly were the creators of our species in some way, shape, or form. But it's, again, even them finding that source energy that's created all of this, every single part of this, and having a relationship with it. Why is it so important?
A lot of people get hung up on the fact that, hey, I'm just one individual. What can I possibly do? I was on down in Los Angeles for Ancient Aliens in January, and one of the guys filming say, "Hey man, that's really cool information, good stuff you have." And my response was, "Well, I aspire to inspire until I expire." And this is my way. These
Well
books and this street fair, How Weird Street Fair, is my way of being in service to others. And that's really what it all comes down to. When you make that decision that you're not going to give in to the fear and the anger, which they would love us to be always afraid and angry. And if you watch your local news, it's always about a murder or a car chase or this or that. And boy, it's a dangerous world out there, and you need to protect yourself and keep your kids in a gated community. That wasn't the way when we grew up. I mean, we were just out until it got dark out playing with our friends. And unfortunately, people have become real paranoid about just letting their kids have fun. That's what it's about. Life is a great adventure, the wonderful adventure. And I can't understand when people get depressed. I have a lot of compassion for people that can get depressed, but I can't understand it because I've never been depressed a day in my life. My friends say I was just born with the happy gene. So I think you can see through this interview that I'm a very optimistic person. I see solutions, not problems, and I want the human race to get through this. And if you guys and myself can add a little bit to that push to get us over the edge and break this grip of tyranny that controls us just by exposing them, not going head to head, not fighting them fire with fire. It's a losing game. Just through intelligence and through compassion, even, because a lot of these people in the control group, they've been manipulated themselves, and there may be even
multiple generations. You know, all they are is the offspring of it, and what they didn't know any better.
That's right, and this may even go above humans.
Yeah.
As I said on one of my Coast to Coast appearances, that the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers may just be the majors and the captains here. The real generals could be these malevolent ETs. And this is what David Icke has taken so much flack for exposing, this reptilian element and the gray aliens, these malevolent ETs, which are service to self. This is the real defining thing, especially if we can just end this with the ET question, is that it really doesn't matter how big their eyes are or how scaly their skin is. What only matters to us, and this is true for the human race and each one of us individually, is, are you service to self or are you going to be service to others? And the proof that I am truly in service to others are the books that I produce and this great big event I produce in San Francisco. I got to work my butt off that day, and I would rather be out there dancing with hot women. But I got my headset on and I'm responding to problems to make this thing work. And that's kind of the sacrifice we have to make. But more importantly, if I could just end this to your listeners, do not cave in to the fear and the anger and this perception that it's a big bad world and everybody's out to get you. People are very friendly. I've been around the world. I've met people in 40 plus countries, and I'll tell you, they're good. And it's funny, the poorer they are, the more generous and welcoming they are. It's this whole illusion of money and wealth and property and acquisitions, and he who dies with the most toys wins. That's bullshit. It's he who loves the most and can do the most for his fellow mankind is the real hero in my mind. And I thank you guys for taking this time to do your show and raising consciousness level. And the common denominator between you and I is my publishing business is the consortium of collective consciousness that does my books and Leo's books and other books. And you guys have consciousness in your name, and that's really what it's all about, is raising the consciousness here.
I'm going to end with this. The love. This is from your book, and this is such, dude. It's an epic quote. The love that you withhold is the pain that you carry. This is a judgment we place upon ourselves. Lifetime after lifetime, it goes on until we learn the lesson. We've all made decisions to withhold love, but we can also choose not to withhold love. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. In the end, all that matters is how much love you have loved and how you loved. Love is the absolute truth. Remember this maxim and reread this passage if the contents of this book seem frightening or make you angry. There are great injustices in the world, but they can all be restored. Love is the absolute truth. And overall, I think that is the capstone of this work that you've done. And even above and beyond your book, that's just, it is what it is, but really is the capstone of this existence. And you've painted the picture so well. This whole entire interview is not to sell books. You'll sell, that'll just be a result of this, but who cares at the end of the day? This isn't even here to say, oh, Brad's the greatest guy of all time. Come and find the guru. The guru era is over, and I think that the real guru is, as Ram Dass said in his book, that we are, each and every one of us is the guru. You are the guru. If you're listening to this, you are the guru, not Brad, not David Icke, not Clint or Richie or anyone else. You are the guru, and love is really, truly the answer. The Beatles weren't wrong. So, Brad, seriously, man, thank you so much. If there's anything we can ever do to support you and your efforts, you reach out, and we're really excited to meet you in person next week at the Contact in the Desert in Joshua Tree. And again, seriously, man, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. And just to put a capstone on what you just said, if you want to see God, look in the mirror. It's the same guru. It's the same master that's right there within you. You only have to bring it out. And when you do, really wonderful things are going to happen, not only in your own life, but to the people around you and hopefully the greater world as a whole. So just keep on going. Don't lose faith. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to all reach it together, and it's going to be a beautiful time.
Jeez. Amen, dude. This is awesome. Brad, you said it. Drop the mic and exit stage left, my friend.
Right on, guys. I can't wait to meet you in person, and let's do this thing.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, people. Thank you for all the listeners out there who keep this going and who are spreading the truth in their ways. And this is such as crazy as this whole story of humankind is. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun, The light is overtaking the darkness, and it's. I'm so glad that we're all a part of it. So. Amen. Hallelujah. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Hasta luego. See you, Brad.
Cheers, guys.